Gracie Jiu Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 168 of the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. Today, my guest will be Thomas Rozdzynski, and we'll get to that in just a moment, but before we do, let's do our quote. And that is, "I wasn't a good student, and even now, I never say that I am better than anybody, but I know I love jiu-jitsu more than anybody. I love the energy, and that it gets deeper the more you study." And that is from Professor Marcelo Garcia. All right, Professor Thomas Rozdzynski is a third-degree black belt under Alberto Crane. He's the owner of ROL Academy of Jiu-Jitsu in Orland Park, Illinois, co-host of the ROL Radio Jiu-Jitsu podcast, and creator of ROL TV. In this episode, we talk about a variety of things, including the challenges of immigrating to the U.S. as a teenager and how it developed his resiliency, the importance of doing hard things, the evolution of Fluffy Thomas, training with Carlosin Gracie Sr., his journey through the Chicago-land Jiu Jitsu scene, and how it changed over time, how starting a film company led to opening his academy, transitioning from his day job to full-time academy owner, the business of jiu-jitsu, and running a successful academy, what makes a quality instructor, making sure you're attracting the right people to your academy for your and their sakes. He goes into detail about what effective teaching is and effective training methods, why people quit jiu-jitsu, what TAC Fit is, and why he loves it so much, what inspires him, and who's had the most impact on his life. So I know you're going to enjoy this interview. After the interview, make sure you stick around for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. And now, without further ado, let's talk to Thomas. All right, I'm speaking with Thomas Rozdzynski. So welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great honor to have you on the show, man. I've been following your work for some time and big fan.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Jiu-Jitsu world is small, so I'm glad that we are able to connect and have this conversation.
Me too. It is small, and it's it's been my privilege to be able to touch base and connect with great people throughout the jiu-jitsu world for. Actually, this show has just turned 10 years old, so it's been a while. So it's been a great pleasure of mine, and we'll talk a little bit about your show as we go as well. But Thomas, let's talk about where you are from originally. I think you're from Poland, and kind of what that was like, and then what led you to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I was born in Poland. Yes, that was many decades ago. But yes, I was born in Poland. I came to States with my father, who migrated here for a better life, if you will. My family shifted over to here when I was a teenager. It's such a long story, and I haven't talked about this for a while. But going through the education system and growing up and essentially being dumped into a foreign country system, if you will, creates a lot of interesting experiences. And as that went on, I went into corporate life, into technology particularly. And my first interaction with jiu-jitsu was my boss in my early 20s, who was a blue belt at that time. And let's just say that at that point of my life, I was not the healthiest person that was walking around. And to this day, he declines that, but to this day, I do think that there was a small mission on his part to put me on the right track, if you will.
Nice.
And he made a lot of efforts to get me on the mat, and finally I have agreed. And since that point that the first day I stepped on the mat, I was hooked. And from there, well, here we are. Now you and I, we can have this conversation, kind of looking back at this as a historical moment, right?
Well, let me just say, I'm familiar with people just in the States who had to uproot and change schools in high school, and how difficult that can be. But I can't even imagine during that time in your life, coming over from a completely different country and just kind of adjusting as a teenager. I mean, it would have challenges at any time in your life, but especially so, it would seem, during that time. So tell us a little bit more, and then we'll get more into the jiu-jitsu, a little bit more what that adjustment was like, what kind of challenges, and how you were able to get through it successfully.
Yeah, I think, when you look at situations like this, you look at a few components that really matter. One is, how does the family factor changes, because you are changing a culture. You may make a cultural shift between two different locations, and it's, even going from between two different states, it might be a big cultural shift. But we're going between two different countries, or different continents even. At that point, you're looking at, a forklift change, if you will. So the family factor is important. Two, there is the language, the communication. When I came to U.S., I thought I knew English. Well, I learned very quickly that I had no clue. So even though there was an exposure, first of all, English is a dominant language in Europe all around. But 30 plus years ago, you had to seek out to learn language, and I had the opportunity to do it. But when I came here and I was put in a situation where that's all it was, I was surrounded by people who couldn't communicate any other way. It really changed everything.
Yes.
And the third factor was friends, and that cultural shift. The things are done differently here. It's not the same. And I can give you endless examples, which now looking back, I actually had the opportunity to go back to Poland a couple of years ago. Excuse me. And what I think is norm now, and what culturally they do over there, and it's normal to them, it is almost mind-blowing to me. And I find myself, being born over there. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Being culturally, that shift is so big, and it's not right or wrong. It's just different.
Right.
And so, like, those three pillars, when you make a shift like this, especially for a young individual who's in their early teens, they are. It's like pulling a Band-Aid. I mean, it's harsh. It's not easy whatsoever. And back then, I always held it against my dad that he threw me into English speaking environment. So like even to this day, there are opportunity for dual language classes or programs for different kids who don't speak, or the English is not their primary language.
Right.
And those opportunities existed back then, but my dad chose not to do that. He literally dumped me day one into an English speaking environment. And, even though I thought I knew how to speak English, I really had a very difficult time. But I'll tell you, within a year, I caught up to it very quickly. And even though my grades were low because of the communication challenges, I was able to catch up with it very fast. And, now I think some of those situations and that environment back then created a certain level of resiliency,
Yes,
if you will,
I was going to
ability
say.
to troubleshoot, and you essentially is a sink or swim kind of situation, and sinking is not an option.
Right.
So, so I think at some point, like I look at this as life lessons, and that even though I did not appreciate it back then when I was a teenager,
I bet.
Today looking back and talking to my dad, and we do talk very, very, very frequently. That's one of the things that I do appreciate that he has done for me, because I don't know what my life would look like if, he chose the bilingual path or the easier path for me. So there is a certain level of appreciation for the way how the life unfolded.
Well, it definitely speaks to your resilience for sure. And, there's a lot of examples of things like that. I've had things in my life where, like when you mentioned sink and swim, my dad literally threw me in the water and said, swim. And you learn fast, right? It can seem harsh at the time, and I'm not saying the approach is best for everybody, but it seems like it worked for you because it was just kind of immersive and you had to do it instead of kind of something that would have been easier in the short term, but might have made it a little harder long term for you. You had to adapt quickly, and it seemed to have worked. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like I said, I appreciate what he has done for me.
Yes.
I think long term, it really creates this resilience, and it puts you in an ability to troubleshoot and really problem solve things and go outside of your comfort zone. And I tell my kids, and I tell kids at the academy, you can do hard things.
Yes,
you can. Don't use it's hard as a reason not to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is today, especially today, that's super important for young individuals to drive forward.
Totally agree. Where you start growing is out of your comfort zone, right? And we'll get into more of your kind of philosophy with your students because I want to hear a lot about that. But let's get back to you were talking about jiu-jitsu in your introduction. Who was the boss you were talking about that kind of gave you that little prod? Yeah,
his name is Eric. And shout out to Eric, one of my best friends to this day.
Nice.
But it was an interesting experience. Like I said, this stage of my life back then, I call it Fluffy Thomas. So let's just paint this. Walking up the stairs is a workout, and any type of physical activity is not even on my radar. And I'm in technology, and I love technology. Sitting behind the desk is what I do all day. And obviously this converts into a unhealthy lifestyle to say the least, right? But I think that when you are that young, and this is early 20s, you don't consider these things. This is not something that is on your forefront of your thoughts, and you're definitely not looking out in the future what this is going to look like 4 years later. And I think, thanks to him, he introduced me to jiu-jitsu with the thought here that this might create a better path. And I, to this day, anytime I see him, I do appreciate it. Anytime I have an opportunity to talk about this publicly, I say, all of us, we have those people in our lives who pivoted the direction of where we are going. And no matter what the situations are, we should always appreciate them, because you just don't know where you would be right now if they didn't make that turn for you or help you then make that turn. So that was a pivotal moment in my life.
It's great, man. It's always cool to go back and look back on your life and see those pivotal moments and some of the people that have guided you. Sometimes consciously and sometimes unconscious, the people that have had such a significant role in our lives and in the direction of our lives. So tell us how where the jiu-jitsu progressed from there and what that journey has been like, brother.
So what's interesting about this story, and I think many others, or handful others, I should say, who still train jiu-jitsu in Chicago-land area, that back then, and this is going to year about 2000, there was really not much jiu-jitsu all around the world, but in Chicago particularly, I think like New York and California, East and West Coast, are getting slowly saturated back then with some talent and just interest around jiu-jitsu. In Midwest, really, truly in Chicago, there were like two different academies. It was Carlosin Gracie and Gracie Baja. And they would, if I could be incorrect on the numbers, but I think there were like 2 or 3 academies. That's it, and there was not much to choose from. So it happens that I end up with Carlosin Gracie Sr., and this is the beginning of my journey. And obviously at that time, I have zero comprehension or realization of who Carlosin is. Today looking back, one of the pioneers, one of the big names, one of the guys who literally changed the way how jiu-jitsu is being viewed today. Back then, it was just another old guy, and so it happened that guy knows jiu-jitsu and teaches you and has a huge heart and welcomes you with open arms, and I find myself amongst those handful who back then were at that room and trained back then, and today, we continue training. Some of us, not all of us, but I think I find myself lucky. I mean, it was a right place at the right time, and, whatever forces led me to that point, I'm telling you, it was irreplaceable memories, irreplaceable moment. I would never give that up.
Nice.
But as time goes on, you go through that, and obviously Carlosin passes away, and things change in Chicago. Jiu-Jitsu land, if you will, and paths change. Different people to continue growing. Some people stop training. Some people continue growing. Some people open academies, and my life turns into a very much so career-driven life, and continuous training, but definitely career becomes a priority. Until about 10 years ago, and that's when another pivot takes place. And this is, I think, that what's interesting about our lives, that we have these opportunities to make choices, and not right or wrong, but choices have consequences, and they lead us to certain things in life. And, again, today I find myself to be a lucky cat. I do get to do jiu-jitsu every day, and I do get to interact with my students, and I do have an opportunity to talk to other jiu-jitsu people, and it's cool. I do have to say that I find myself very fortunate, and I do consider myself a lucky cat.
I like that, a lucky cat. And jiu-jitsu has become, I guess, one of the biggest focuses of your life, and you do a lot of different things within jiu-jitsu. And at some point, you opened your academy, so let's talk about what that was like. And then I want to get into what you feel like is instrumental in creating a great academy culture. Things like, how do you deal with bad attitudes or mat dominators or smashers, that are kind of excessive. How you deal with visitors, just anything you think of about successful academy. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the beginning of this, right? So it happens, my journey takes me all around Chicago-land, between jobs and moving homes. So I had an opportunity to be exposed to different jiu-jitsu styles of teaching and different jiu-jitsu styles, period, as the time unfolds. And as I mentioned, the career focus is becoming, at that time, around between 2010 and 2015, it's really becoming a very, very forefront of what I do, supporting my family and really driving that while training jiu-jitsu as a hobby. And at some point during that time, friend of mine and I, we start a very small film production company, and we called it All Things BJJ. Mm. And we focus, it's still on YouTube, you can look it up. And we start producing very short documentaries on different individuals. And I think, well, we didn't get far with this. I think we made 6 or 7, if I'm not mistaken. But we took a lot of pride in it, with quality, in a story. And I think what's important to mention here, I come from photography background. So that visual appealing stimulation, if you will, telling a story in a very visual way was always important to me. So as that company starts getting off the ground, we start filming the documentaries and talking to different individuals telling their stories. The thought comes along where if we had our location, this would be much easier. We wouldn't have to travel. We could just bring people in. And this was like the first seed of having the academy. What was interesting about this whole thing is that the film was the primary focus. The academy was just the location. And we knew that paying for all the expenses of the film might not be covered by what we do at this point of time. So the academy will supplement some of that, and it allows us to continue filming while we have a jiu-jitsu club on the side, with some guys training and obviously supporting that, right? So, right. And as the thought unfolds, and this is over a period of a year or so, we quickly find out that if we want to have an academy, then we got to be kind of serious about this. And as time goes on, and this is a very slow and progressive change, but as time goes on, before we even open, we are realizing that this academy actually is becoming a more serious thought of the production company that we have.
Interesting.
And again, this is none of this was 100% intentional, but as we get closer to this quote unquote opening day, more serious we think about the academy. But then there are obstacles like, I have a full-time career job, and, it's career's going well, like I'm on a great path. And there's, this check that comes in every 2 weeks, which is very difficult to give up. Like right. That's kind of the, right. It's kind of a big deal, especially for the family,
Yes.
Like all these little things that you don't think about. This is cool, but as all of this again continues unfolding,
sorry about that.
You're fine. And then, we start thinking how to make this work, and originally we opened up the academy, and then this film production kind of sort of slowly fades away, until the point where we said like, well, we're just going to shut this down, and which to this day brings a tear to my eye every time I see it, when I watch these videos, because I can tell you stories behind each and every single one of those videos that we've made, and they are great. I mean, we had Andre Galvo, and we had we had so many guys in there. Wow. And it was great. I mean, look it up. It's still on.
I definitely will.
It's still on YouTube. So at some point we had to make the decision. If the academy is going to be a successful business, even on a small scale, we have to make choices. And I think this kind of leads me to this thought that many share out there from an entrepreneur perspective, that lack of focus kills the business. And this was one of the biggest concerns that we had at that point. Between a career that I had, trying to open an academy, and then running this film production company, it was too much, so something had to give and something had to go. And so it happened. The film company was done, and we stopped doing that, and then we converted to opening the academy. Now, there is still one more problem. I'm working 2 jobs now. And, just to paint a picture, leaving, at 6 a.m. to my normal job, working whatever I need to do, go straight to the academy, teaching 2 or 3 classes, and then going home at 11 p.m. and then doing it over again every single day. It was a burn, So yeah, that was hard. But I'll tell you that I think it was harder on my family than it was on me. Like I am a strong believer when you love what you do, the burn is not as hot.
Mm-hmm.
You see the reward, you see the satisfaction. Now, at the same time, I knew we couldn't continue this. Like, it was impossible. First of all, physically, I would probably collapse at some point, but also is not fair to everybody involved. And then again, business is not growing. So there's like multiple factors why things like situations like this should be questioned. And we have decided that developing a plan for me to exit corporate was key part of this. And there were some tough conversations. There were a lot of planning. But I do remember that we had my final year at corporate life fully planned out. We knew exactly which date I'm going to exit.
Wow, that's impressive.
It was coming down the pipe. Closer it got, tougher it got, and some tough conversations at the corporate life too, right? And the day came, and you turned that resignation letter, and and you kind of are scared because you are giving up
your security.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's no safety net. Right. Zero. There's no guarantees. There's no insurance. There is none of that. Like all that goes away. I think oftentimes we really underestimate and we don't appreciate what we have until it's really gone.
Yes, true.
And to this day, I remember like leaving the door of my corporate job for the last day and like you're never going back here. And there is this, emotional roller coaster, if you will. Yet there's so much excitement because now this hobby, because that's all it was, even though it was every day, it's a hobby. Now it converts into a career. Now it converts into a job. Now you actually make decisions. Right. Now you cannot teach 3 classes. Now you have to teach 5 classes because you need to generate revenue. Now this whole thing changes now, literally almost overnight. And I think what is the scariest part behind this is even though you think there is no room for error because it appears that way, you will make errors every single day.
Yeah.
And it is so similar to jiu-jitsu. It is so similar to what we experience on the mat, where we don't want to lose, yet you will lose every day.
Right.
You will fail, you will trip, you will fall, and sooner you embrace that failure is part of your success, sooner you explode and you are successful and it goes easier and it's just that is more enjoyable for each individual.
Those are wise words. I really appreciate that story and you're talking about part of your journey. I had a school I opened many years ago and I was supposed to have someone that was going to be helping quite a bit. And right before I opened, that kind of fell through. So I had a full-time job and then I was running every class, kids, adults, and it became, something that was my passion. And it really started making me feel like this is not fun. This is, a drudgery after a while. So for the good of not wanting to, be completely tainted and turned off with jiu-jitsu, I made the decision, and I had young kids. So it really was hard with a full-time job and a family with young kids and trying to water that plant too, so to speak. It became just too much. So I just made the decision to walk away from the school. But I admire people like you that stuck it out, even though, like you said, you couldn't have done it indefinitely. But for a time, you were able to really go through everything you had to do to come out the other side and make a success. Just like I admire anybody that comes from another country, like your parents, and for a better life and make a better life. I admire that greatly. So props to you for sticking it out, planning it well, and then even though, like you said, even though everything doesn't go perfect and there are mistakes, you stayed with it and have become quite a success. So hats off to you, brother.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and now looking in retrospect, looking back in the last 10 years, it's been a ride, I have to say. And again, I keep saying this, but I feel like a lucky cat, not from the perspective that I got lucky, from the perspective that I feel lucky to be in this position.
Yeah, grateful.
And I think, grateful, appreciative. And I think one of the big things that many underestimate in the situation. So jiu-jitsu is such a unique business or unique environment where we love it so much. We want to share that love with others. And I think oftentimes this generates this thought of, well, let me get some guys and I can teach them. But we often underestimate the other side of all of this, that, well, you have to train somewhere, and short of you having a space, you have to pay for it, and you have to pay for it now other things. And this is where it turns into a business. You see, and this hobby, this cool thing that we were doing, now it has to have a certain level of responsibility, and it has to generate certain revenue, and it has to, well, there's an accountability for whoever is doing this. And I think that part oftentimes is underestimated. So when I look around and I, through the conversations with many, I feel like there's like this divide almost between clubs and then actual academies, and if you look around, there's big differences between them, but I don't feel like there's anything in the middle. It's like either we're running a hobby, or we are actually running actual business that teaches jiu-jitsu, and that's a very different approach.
It is, and I've seen so many people that love jiu-jitsu, want to be an instructor, and the natural progression in their mind is, oh, I should own an academy because I love it and I want to teach on a bigger scale. But they have no background in business, which, not to say you have to have a background, but you definitely have to seek out quality instruction in that area, right? Because it is a business and you have to treat it as such. And if you don't, I've seen a lot of places go down, because they were great instructors, but they just didn't have a clue about running a business.
Well, and unfortunately, the pandemic, I think, was an eye-opener. And
true.
Whether you agree with it or not, whether you think it was fake or not fake, it doesn't matter. The point is that it had an impact.
Yes.
It had an impact on everybody. And because of the physical contact that we experience in jiu-jitsu and what we do, I think I think jiu-jitsu communities and jiu-jitsu businesses were one of the most impacted, overall, next to restaurants and, clubs and things of that nature.
For sure.
You know what I mean? But, like a soccer was less impacted than jiu-jitsu, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Or even like CrossFit, I think, was less impacted than jiu-jitsu. And that was the moment where I think that serious approach to business really did matter. Like, I personally know people who shut down their academies and they never opened them again. And they had to pivot in their life and do something else, and, there are those who did stick around, those who did make, smart choices and knowledgeable decisions, and they are around, and just I suppose that's part of life, but it's a lesson that we all kind of learned.
Sure. And when speaking of an academy, to be successful, you have to realize it is a business, not a hobby. But also, how do you deal with the different kinds of people that come into your academy? Like I said, I talked about people with, say, bad attitudes or who try to smash everybody in sight or things like that. How do you deal with that, or what's your approach to that, as well as what, in your opinion, makes a quality instructor?
Yeah, so I think a lot of this starts from the top with the vision. A lot of this starts with the direction in which the academy is going, right? And this is where we can start talking about self-defense, hobbyists, professional athletes, competitors. Like there's so many flavors and ways of doing things in jiu-jitsu business, I think, on a martial arts business in general, that you have to decide, one has to decide, in my opinion, the vision and the direction in which they want to serve. One that has a competitive school and it brings let's just say 45 or 50-year-old individual who has no desire competing, I'm not really sure if they are setting them for success. Perhaps, but the odds, I think, are low. And vice versa, if you have a higher demographic of students, or that's what you're aiming for, and there's 20-year-old wrestler comes in, either they will hurt other people on the mat, or they will not be satisfied, even if they don't hurt anyone. Even if we don't look at this negatively, they will not be satisfied with what they are getting, because the culture and what is being taught at the academy might not serve them. So really identifying what you want to do with your business, I think it's critical to your success. And having a larger vision of where you want to go. How big you want this academy to be? Do you want it to be at 50 students, or do you want to be at 350 students? Or perhaps you want to have multiple locations, each of them 500 students. I mean, all that matters, in my opinion, from the beginning.
So a very clear plan, right?
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that.
But do you feel like having, like what you just described, going from, say, a corporate job with all that security to, hey, it's all about the academy now, and that's my living. Do you think when people in a similar situation, do you feel like that causes them to say, I'm really more interested in self-defense instead of competition, but I feel like I've got to be for everybody, like bring everybody in just so I'll be, successful as far as financially. Do you feel like people fall into that?
I think people do. I think that's one of the big mistakes that are being made in business in general. This is not only jiu-jitsu oriented, but it is in general as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. We're trying to cater towards everybody.
Yeah.
And if you look at successful business owners, they don't cater towards everybody. They cater to a specific demographic, and they seek the demographic out. Look, Starbucks. Starbucks is not interested in somebody who wants to spend $2 a cup of coffee. They are not. Like it or don't like it. Doesn't matter if you shop at Starbucks, but their pricing is what it is. They serve a specific product, and they are successful with it. Now, across the street, you're going to have a Dunkin' Donuts. And their business model is, we don't want to have a $5 coffee. We want to have a $2 coffee. And that's okay, too, because people will come and will do it. But what makes both of them successful, that they have defined their demographic. They have a specific business plan. They have a vision for the future. And that's what makes them successful, overall as a business. And I think the moment we identify that in jiu-jitsu, two things happen. One, you serve quality products to the people that come to you. But two, you stop stressing out about not having people you don't want to have.
That's big.
So I think at the beginning, and this is very difficult in the first few years when you open an academy, because you want to generate revenue, you want students, yet finding the students with a specific demographic is hard, obviously, because the pool is smaller, right? So we are almost in this moment of desperation, if you will. And having a plan for that is really, really important. And don't take me wrong, that does not mean that you cannot have a competition class or you cannot have self-defense class and kind of mix and match things. But I think defining where you fit and who is your demographic is really, really important. Like in my academy, we know exactly who's our demographic. And if somebody comes outside of that spectrum, it's not that we reject them, but we know that this might be a different conversation, and serving people for what they are looking for is key. It's like, think of it in the sense of you walking into a dealer and you have X amount of money, but that car costs 4 times more. No matter how well you sell, you will never sell that car. They don't have that money.
Right.
So understanding where you fit and who is your client is critical to your success. But when we are at the beginning, it's sometimes, it's a little foggy there, and it's hard to see that.
So, like example, if you're more of a overall self-defense oriented school, and somebody comes in and they're asking about competition, you might say something like, "Hey, we can certainly help you to some degree, prepare for competitions, and we even have a class that gets into that. But we're primarily geared towards self-defense. So if your goal is to be, world champion, and you really want to focus on competition, so-and-so down the street's probably geared better to you because that's 100% what they do." Something like that?
Well, something along those lines, yes. I think honest conversation with a client is a key to creating a healthy and strong relationship. And ability to say, it's okay to go and look somewhere else, I think it's extremely difficult for many. But I think that confidence in what you do really radiates and magnifies to your client. Like, I'll tell you examples here at my academy is like, we want you to come and train with us. We want you to sign up. But if you like to go and see other academies, please do. As a matter of fact, once you're done with it, call me because I want to know what you learned from them so I can do business better.
That's
and
great.
Even if it doesn't work out, good for you, man. You found a place where you feel at home. Because I know that if you sign up with me and this is not a place for you, you're going to leave anyway.
Right.
So why be stressed out?
Yes, either leave or before you do, just be complaining or unhappy.
Absolutely.
But the beauty of what you're describing is you attract your real vibe. I mean, your real tribe, rather. You really the people that do come and stay and sign up are people that you're looking for. The people that are going to be extremely happy there, and it's just a win-win all around.
And it's something that you mentioned, earlier on is like these bad apples, right? And I think I don't believe that people intentionally do bad things at the academy to draw attention to themselves. They just simply don't fit.
No, you're right.
This is not a place for them. And this is where it starts. The moment you identify this is where you can help and correct, and always the goal should be the entire academy, not individual student. And I know this sounds harsh, and somebody's listening to this, they are rolling their eyes. Who is this Polish idiot, and all that. but the point is, the moment we start catering towards one individual person, this is where cliques begin to be created, and bad vibes are getting created. And then, if you cater towards one person, what is the other person who's next to them going to think about you?
That's right.
Right. So, this is why I feel like people overall looking from outside in, they feel like the running Jiu-Jitsu academy is simple. Like this is all we do as instructors. We eat acai in the morning. We come, we stretch out a little bit. We teach a class. Then we go surf if we can. If not, we take a nap. Then probably there is another acai, and we teach another class, and then we go home. Because what else possibly we would be doing? Or maybe a private in between.
Right.
But there is so much to it. And again, this kind of goes back to that thought of, if you really look around, there is successful academies and there is successful clubs, and neither one is wrong. Like that's how I look at this. I personally know individuals who have no desire having a big academy. They have their 30, 40 students, and they are perfectly content and happy with it. And good for them. Good for them, because they do what they love.
Yes.
But the moment we start pretending that you want to have a big academy, but you're unwilling to do the things to set the academy for success, this is where the disconnect comes in. And I think some find themselves in this tough spot, deciding what they want to do and how come things are not working. How come that place is so big and they have so many students, but I cannot do that. And a lot of that comes to the education, what we do, how we do it, and how we learn about it.
Very true. Very true. So when looking at a quality instructor, what comes to mind is traits that make them a good quality instructor? Yeah,
so this one is it kind of learning a hard way in a sense. I for a long time I fell into this category, into this thought, or I envisioned myself as a good instructor because I know Jiu-Jitsu. And as time went on, and particularly as I start talking to different individuals on our podcast, on ROL Radio, I start really seeing that good competitor or good Jiu-Jitsu player does not necessarily make a good instructor. Being a teacher and being an instructor, it's a very different skill set. Now, you still need to know Jiu-Jitsu, but knowing how to teach Jiu-Jitsu is very different than knowing how to do Jiu-Jitsu.
Yes.
And more research I've done, more books I've read, more people I talk to, it becomes very visible that this thought, this topic, is not only Jiu-Jitsu related. This is everywhere. You can be a great engineer. It does not make you a great trainer for engineers.
That's true.
You can be a phenomenal basketball player. It does not make you a great coach.
Yes.
Right? Matter of the fact, there is this, I think, unproven theory that the guys who never got to be number one, they are better coaches and instructors than the guys who did achieve the ultimate success. And don't quote me on this. I don't have any proof behind this. but if you look at historically, in especially in a sport arena, that is visible. The guys who, like, I don't know. Sometimes I ask myself, I love Michael Jordan, a huge fan of his.
I was just going to say.
How come he's not a coach? Like, and I read his book. Like, I know why he says he's not a coach, but there's a thought behind that. How come other champions are not? How come the other, best of the best of the best are not coaches? And this is not applicable all around. This is not like a golden rule or anything. But there is some similarities. There is some gray area here that overlaps between these topics. And I think noticing that is really, really important, which in jiu-jitsu I think is often ignored and forgotten.
Well, and the other side of that, Michael Jordan isn't a coach, but his coach, let's say even his high school or college coaches, were never they didn't rise to the fame level that he had and success, and yet they were instrumental at shaping him and honing his skill in. So, like you said, they're two separate things. Being able to teach and break things down and make them understandable and inspire people is very different than being great at being a tactician, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then once we identify the fact that one can teach, they have a skill for teaching or an opportunity to learn how to teach, now we have to identify where are they good at. So I'm a big fan of putting right people in the right seats. A phenomenal person in a wrong seat will fail, and vice versa. So finding those combinations is important. So I often look at this. There has to be a reason why in education we take our kids to school, why they have a different teacher each year. How come second grade teacher does not teach as eighth grade? Like, what's the reason behind this? Because could it be because the second grade teacher is better with younger kids and they can relate to them better? He can motivate, or she can motivate them better. And the eighth grade teacher perhaps has a different motivational skills and different communication skills, so they can communicate with older kids. And I think if you look at it that way, it changes everything, because that means that whoever teaches your kids' classes should like teaching kids' classes. They need to like kids.
Absolutely.
It kind of ruins the whole thing if you don't like kids teaching kids' classes, right?
Yes.
But then there's even deeper. We can go into this deeper. A person who teaches fundamentals class, they need to have ability and they need to have desire to simplify things and make it easier to understand, versus somebody who teaches advanced class and they can go John Danaher style when they break down one single move for an hour and a half, and that's fine because you stimulate different group of people. So like you asked me what makes good instructors. One is ability to teach. You have to love not only sharing that information, but you need to know how to share that information. Here in my academy, we have instructor course every single year, and it is comprehensive. It's probably I don't know the exact, about 20 hours or so. I mean, and it's big. And we try to create a platform for the guys who want to teach in the future, where we teach them simple things. Here's one thing that often is being raised as a question. How do you tell a student that they are wrong without making them feel bad? That's $1 million question.
Sure, absolutely.
So like I have this theory that when student comes in first time for first class, there's 3 things that we avoid every single time. 1, they cannot get hurt.
Yes.
If they get hurt, it's over. It's done. 2, they cannot be embarrassed.
Yes.
And 3, they cannot be wrong.
I love that.
Here's a caveat to this. They will be wrong, and they will be embarrassed. Right?
Yes.
So how do you soften the blow? How do you manipulate the situation where you present it? It's okay to be wrong. Yeah, I know this sucks right now, but I'm here to help you.
Right.
And I promise you will never get hurt. or at least, we are avoiding this situation. We're creating a safe environment for you to engage in this combat sport. But what moment one of those three things happen, the likelihood of then continue training is much lower now. And it doesn't mean they won't come back.
No, you're right.
There will be a point of hesitance, right? So again, going back to my previous question is, how do you tell a student that they are wrong without making them feel embarrassed? Now, that's a skill.
It is a skill.
And over years, I've seen instructors, unfortunately, standing across the entire room and say, Bobby, this is wrong. You suck. Don't do that.
Oh, my God.
Right? But you probably have seen that, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right? So teaching is a skill.
Mm-hmm.
It's a skill. And unfortunately, not a lot of instructors invest into that. Now, today, I think Jiu-Jitsu world is evolving. I think today we have, we are smarter. We are definitely smarter than we were a decade or 2 decades ago. And I think there is a effort that's being put into being a good instructor, running a good academy.
Without a doubt.
Having good business. You know what I mean? But there's still many out there who don't. And, I suppose that's for the student to decide whether this is the environment that they prefer.
I agree. There are literally still people, that don't, their academies don't have much of a curriculum, which I feel like that's, I think at this point, if you don't have a curriculum, you're at a loss. And no one says you have to, but it just helps, be structured and everything. That's just my opinion. But also there's people that still just, okay, here's what we're teaching today. Here's what we're learning. We'll show it a few times. Details aren't great, no reinforcement, and then just no layering of the information, and then no regard to, auditory, visual, kinesthetic, anything, just hammer it out there and then let's do it. And people are lost.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
I do this interesting exercise during my instructor course. We play a instructional video on a screen, and first I ask all the students to watch the video on the TV and listen to what they say, what the instructor is saying, and they watch whatever 3-minute instruction, whatever it is, right? And then I say, okay, now I'm going to mute it. And I mute it, and I say, watch, next video. Can you tell me what he's teaching? And they're like, oh, yeah, he's teaching armbar. I was like, okay, do you know that because you know the move, or do you know that because you're watching it? Oh. And then a third time, I say, now turn away, and I'm going to turn the sound on. You have zero visual. Do you know what he's teaching? Oh. Now, this is an eye-opening, right? Because you mentioned visual and auditory learning and repetition learning and so on, right?
Yeah.
Understanding the fact that if you have 50 students in your class, 40 or 50% of them will be visual learners. They have to see what they are learning. There is a certain percentage that will be auditory learners, that they have to hear what you say. And there is a small percentage, but there's still a percentage of students who needs a repetition. They need to repeat it hundreds of times before they even get it.
They need to internalize it in their bodies.
Absolutely. No, having that information changes everything.
Yes.
Because what if you don't explain well and all of your auditory students just lost them? Then what happens? What? They ask a million questions, and they walk away, go home, and they scratch their heads. And then they go on YouTube, and they Google things, and all. You know what I mean? And it creates a domino effect.
Yes.
So, like, when we ask a question is what makes a good instructor? That right there. Knowing your students, knowing how to present their information, knowing how to make it interesting, how to make it fun, how to make it where they go home and they are like, yeah, I got this.
Yeah.
I got this.
There's no better feeling for a student when they get out of a class and they're going home and they have the endorphins of being in jiu-jitsu, a class, but then they just have that high of, I understand this. This is exciting. I get it, and I'm going to be able to do this. I mean, yeah. Yeah,
this is it. Listen, it's a skill. It's a
sure.
skill. It's an art of teaching, And then we got to ask ourselves as instructors, how do we maximize their success? This is where you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, goal setting. How do you set the goal for a student? How do you have these conversations? What do you need out of the student in order for them to, one, have an achievable goal, something they can reach, but it's not easy, that they can work towards it? How you do that? How do you set them for success where they don't walk away from the class yet without the stimulation, without feeling satisfied? Right. At the same time, if it's too easy, they're going to well, this was nothing. Like,
right.
why I just wasted my time. Right. And then everybody is different. Everybody is different.
Yeah. You got to find a place where it's not overwhelming them, where they're just, I can't get this, and I'm just walking away frustrated, or so easy that, like you said, it's not challenging, it's not stimulating. So staying somewhat in a comfort zone, and this is hard because you have all been a group with different comfort zones, but keeping it kind of at the lowest common denominator for a bit, but then at the right time, when the student's been here a little while and has a little confident, when they're ready, and asking them to tell you when they're ready for a little more intensity or whatever with their partner, and then pushing it a little bit so they start growing because it's a little harder, but when they're ready.
That's the fine balance that we have to keep as instructors. And if you ask me, this all boils down to one simple fact: knowing your student.
Yes.
And having these conversations. See, way back when I was starting, nobody told me what is required to be a blue belt. Nobody told me, forget about belts, but nobody told me what is expected of me. The only expectation there was a show up. And as good that was, I stuck around. Like, I was too stupid to quit, too stubborn, but then many quit. And I often ask myself the questions: why do people quit jiu-jitsu? Like, I'm yet to meet, or maybe I've met a handful of people in my entire 20 plus years on the mat who said, I don't like jiu-jitsu. This might be one or two or three, I don't know. But overall, everybody loves jiu-jitsu. So if you love jiu-jitsu, why do you stop training? Like, that's an interesting conversation. That's a and people will give you reasons like, well, I don't have time. Well, we all have the same amount of time, technically. It's 24 hours. We got to sleep. We got to do things. We got to go to it. Like, I get that part.
Sure.
There are things out of our control. But is it really that you don't have time, or this is not your priority?
That's it, exactly.
Because that's ultimately what it is.
Yes.
And there are academies. There are academies that, again, will have 1 or 2 classes a day, but there are academies like ours where we have, 6, 7 classes literally stacked full every single day, and coming and saying schedule doesn't work. I don't know about that. Like, this is, and I get it. To each their own. I completely understand life is life, but I think all of it, a lot of it, boils down to priority. Is this important to you? Because if it was, you probably would make time.
I 100% agree with that. We make time for what's important, whether that's staying in touch with an old friend, whatever it may be. If it's important, we'll make time. And I do think, life gets in the way for some people, so I'm not trying to say everybody falls into this, but just like at a job, rarely do people leave only because of the job they don't like. More often it's because their immediate supervisor or someone in their supervisory chain that's making life kind of really unbearable for them. If they don't like that, how they're being managed or not supported or whatever, people statistically are a lot more likely to walk away from that position. Same with the jiu-jitsu, I think. If you, like you said, if you know your people and you're servicing them and supporting them well, they will feel valued and they'll feel like they're growing and they're really getting something out of this, as opposed to, it's not a great fit, so I'm just going to walk away. And I'll make the excuse that it's just, I don't have time.
I agree 100%. I mean, 100%. I granted, there's a lot of students in my academy, and do I know every single one of them? I try to, but also knowing a student in my mind is not just knowing their name, it's really truly knowing them.
Sure.
How many kids do they have? What does their wife do for a living? How old are their kids? What school do they go to? Do they play different sports? That's truly knowing a student. And I try to make an effort to have a conversation with everybody that's at the academy, and we make a lot of efforts to reach out to the people who, missed a week. like it's part of our processes at the academy. If you wouldn't see you for a week, you are getting a phone call. You're getting the MIA. It's like, where have you been? How come? What's going on? How can we help you? Well, we need to get you in here, because if you don't train, you're not going to feel good. And really, there is a lot of truth to that. So we want you to be successful.
Yeah. And to be fair, the more students you have, it's a lot harder to know each and every one of them to a huge degree. You certainly want to be as familiar as possible, but that's where having your staff comes in too. So it doesn't all have to be you personally, but at least somebody, right, in your academy should know. Maybe different instructors know different groups or whatever more because of the classes they teach, but they should definitely be on somebody's radar, and they should know a lot about them for sure. But it's not always gonna fall on you, because if you're at the top and you have so many people, that's just not realistic, I think.
Absolutely. 100%, especially with kids. You might know kids, you might not know the parents, right. Or one parent only. Like there are all these dynamics there out of our control. But often, what we are talking about, that we are making an effort to know everybody.
Yes.
How many academies don't do any of this? How many academies just simply run a class and they barely know their students?
True.
So sure. I think that's the hard part. And again, all we do is just eat acai and
that's it. And then you go bask in the sun or take your nap, man.
That's right. That's what we do all day.
Awesome. So, twofold question, my friend. What inspires you, just in general in your life? What inspires you, and who's had the most impact in your life, either on or off the mat? Doesn't matter.
All right, so those are tough ones. What inspires me? Truthfully, at this point of life, growth of others. That's my big motivator today. Whether that's students, and I am obsessed with my students growing. I'm obsessed with creating platforms and systems and processes for their life to be easier. On the mat particularly, but also off the mat. Like from creating video platforms to curriculums to creating brain maps to helping, with one-on-one sessions, to setting even schedules for students when and how they should train to keep them engaged or avoid the burnout. Like that what really drives me, and especially that I have young kids, and both of my boys right now are in jiu-jitsu and they are loving it, and I love seeing the growth. I love seeing the progression that jiu-jitsu environment gives people and the opportunities for them to become better. So that's my drive. It's almost my mission today as it stands, and perhaps that will change in the future, but today I put a lot of focuses on that, including my staff. So like I put a lot of emphasis of my instructors getting better. I push them to educate themselves. Don't just rely on the curriculum that we have. Really get better at this. Get better at teaching. Be better instructor. How do we run the classes better? How to make it more interesting? And giving others opportunity to do that. So that's a big driving factor for me. And as far as who had a biggest impact in my life, I think singular is my dad. We haven't talked about this, but there was a period of my life where my dad was not present due to circumstances out of our control, and it is what it is. And today, my dad lives in Poland, and I'm here in Chicago, and we literally talk every day, if not every other day. Wow. It's great, and he's a huge trash talker, and I hear from him every single time I talk to him that I do nothing but my feet up on the table and eat acai, but it's such a, and I think one of the big factors why he is my superhero is that he was, and so this is what I throw in his face every single time, that he did not see my jiu-jitsu until my black belt ceremony.
Wow.
He thought that I'm going to get my arms broken, my face pounded, and all the other things. And he refused to witness any of the competition, any of the training sessions, any of that. He was not in it. He just removed himself. But then when the black belt ceremony came along, that was the first time when he saw me in the gi. And we both cried like girls, and that's fine. And life was good. And now he's the biggest fan. So, he's my hero.
Oh, that's great, man. That's great. And so cool that you have someone like that, that you talk to every day and you have that special relationship with, man. It's really, really beautiful.
Yeah, he's like I said, he's my superhero, and I look up to him quite a bit. So
awesome. All right, my friend. Real quick before we close, I want to ask you. I know you're, besides being a third degree black belt, you're a TAC Fit instructor. Tell us a little bit about what that is.
So TAC Fit so I discovered TAC Fit just a couple years ago with Professor Alberto Crane. From Burbank, California, and I encourage you guys to check it out. It's a lifestyle. It's a fitness engagement for everybody, from mobility to actual workouts. But what is phenomenal about TAC Fit is the fact it links into jiu-jitsu, and this is completely coincidental. These are two separate activities, if you will, but they have the same principles. Things like grip confirmation and alignment of your spine, driving with your legs, your hip thrusting, and all those little things that we do in jiu-jitsu, they literally convert into TAC Fit and vice versa. So, recently, about 8 months ago or so, we introduced TAC Fit fully at my academy. We have it every single day, twice a day, actually. And a lot of the students who struggle with mobility, that's one, and students who had desire to, improve their health, lose some weight, and perhaps get a little bit more in shape to complement their jiu-jitsu, they find there's a phenomenal way to do this. And more importantly, TAC Fit is known as the smartest workout in the world, meaning it's not how heavy you lift, it's not how long you train, but really being smart and technical about your motions, using club bells, kettlebells, and maces, and bands, and body weight workouts. So it's a phenomenal way just to bridge into jiu-jitsu, especially if being healthy is your desire and really is in the forefront of your mind. So I encourage you guys to check it out. Google it. It's all over the internet. It's easy to find. It's cool stuff. Matter of fact, I'm going back to California this summer to get another certification for club bells with one of my superstars here at the academy, Edgar, who's our instructor, one of our black belts, and he's an instructor for TAC Fit as well. So we're going to do that this summer. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
That's awesome, man. I'm hugely interested in mobility. So for that reason alone, I'll definitely look into it as well. And I'll make sure to put a link in the show notes for everybody so they can check it out as well. So also, if you haven't checked out Thomas's podcast, ROL Radio, ROL TV is your online jiu-jitsu library, and then ROL Radio is a podcast, which is a great one, so everybody check that out. Didn't have time to get into talking about that much, but check it out for yourself, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. And Thomas, I want to thank you for taking time to let us know about you, about your life, and feel like we've gotten to know you better. So thank you so much, and thanks for all the lives you're touching and helping in jiu-jitsu.
Well, I appreciate you having me here, and a great conversation. Thank you for the open platform to share jiu-jitsu, and I think that's beauty behind what we do today, that we can actually have these conversations, and I do the same thing on my podcast, so it's part of the jiu-jitsu lifestyle, right?
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Much respect, and long, healthy, happy life, my friend.
Thank you so much. I'll see you around.
Ciao. All right, really enjoyed that conversation with Thomas. What an interesting guy he is. All right, have you heard about New Hope Regeneration? New Hope Regeneration is a company that offers regenerative and stem cell therapies. I personally have had this therapy done and can attest to how incredible it is. One of the best things I've ever done for my health and longevity. So if you're not quite the person you were 10 years ago, or if you're suffering from any kind of physical degeneration, or breakdown, go ahead and check out newhoperegeneration.com/Marty, and you'll be able to find out more information as well as schedule a free consult about your specific needs and goals. All right, this episode is brought to you by Breathing for BJJ. And Breathing for BJJ is a 31-day online video program that I spent 2 years in developing, and it's designed to transform your jiu-jitsu experience. You know, there's nothing more important than your breathing. It makes a profound difference in your jiu-jitsu experience. Optimizing your breathing takes your jiu-jitsu experience to a whole new level and has a huge impact on your performance. Learning to regulate your breathing can completely transform your jiu-jitsu experience. Being able to slow your breathing down when you need to, create energy when needed, breathe when in uncomfortable positions and situations, and to find the calm within the chaos are skills you need to master to create and achieve the optimal jiu-jitsu experience. This program uses a biomechanical approach to actually target and strengthen your specific breathing muscles, creating efficiency and effectiveness in your functional capacity to breathe. It's time to make breathing the foundation of your BJJ. And you can find out more at www.breathingforbjj.com. Next up is the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment.
At the intersection of what is and what can be, our stories are written. It's where decisions are made and lives are ultimately defined. In which way you go when staring at this fork in the road can mean everything. Maybe you go left. Take the easy path, minimal upside, minimal downside, proven and tangible. It gives immediate identity, but also brings with it some degree of regret, not because you won't like who you are, but because you'll never know what you could have been. Maybe you can't live with that. Maybe you go right. Let's say you roll the dice, dream chaser, eyes fixated on the horizon, moving toward it, soon to realize that the world you live in will bring you to your knees faster than you can blink. That uncertainty hurts, that effort without immediate validation is pain, and that the road less traveled is less traveled because of the difficulty associated with it. And now you have a very important question to ask yourself. Do you have what it takes? Can you see the big picture when the sky appears to be falling down around you? When all it takes is to backpedal and be comfortable again, to take the other road, to return to what you knew, can you still move forward? See, it's a funny thing when you're in pain, it becomes very easy to forget why you began. The pragmatic human brain sees discomfort as a problem and it wants it gone immediately. People don't give up because they're cowards. They don't quit because they don't have what it takes. They give up because they can no longer see the big picture. They forgot why they started. When all you see is directly in front of you, you lose the ability to see your finish line. When you're at a crossroad, you have to know this. If you take the hard road, you are betting on the future at the expense of the present. Dreams are a sacrifice. They're not some fluffy concept invented to prop you up after a hard day. Sure, they're the top of the mountain, but they're also the bottom. They're the dirt, the rocks, the scratching, the clawing. They're what people don't see. The chapters that are not read aloud. And when you're in it, when you are truly in it, uncertainty needs to be embraced like it's the wind to your sails. You signed that dotted line for a reason, because you can see past the immediate, the now. Because to get to the top, you start at the ground floor and you elevate past every single level that stands between you and your dream. Now will not intimidate or discourage, because you are bigger than right now. You are the pages unwritten. And you did what so few people are willing to do. You didn't look at the pen, you picked it up. Now write a story for the ages.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. As always, I thank you for listening. Hope you're enjoying the show. Please like and follow us on social media and help us spread the word by reposting our posts and telling others about the show. You can leave comments on the website at www.GracieJujitsuRocks.com. You can also go to iTunes and leave comments, as well as rate the show. And we would appreciate a 5-star rating, which helps us with our standing in iTunes. You can also leave comments on our YouTube channel. If you have suggestions for the show, please don't hesitate to give those. We always like feedback and suggestions. Okay, that's going to do it. So until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.